What's up, everyone? Okay, so recently a lot of top-rated sellers who are dropshippers lost their top-rated status because eBay is getting wise on the whole cancellation thing when you have out of stocks. Obviously, as a traditional seller, this is very easy to avoid because most of the time when you post an item for sale on eBay, you actually have it in hand. So the only time that your item is gonna, you're gonna be unable to fulfill the sale is if your item is damaged or if you screw something up, right? And that's not going to happen that often. And it can happen less than 2% of the time. If it happens more than 2% of the time, then you will lose your ability to sell on eBay. And for this reason, I've always just completely avoided it because I really want to make sure that I don't lose that ability. But by doing so, I'm actually kind of infringing eBay's terms of use, right? So that's something you have to figure out is how do you feel about it kind of morally? Are you okay lying about your cancellations? Because as a dropshipper, it's very hard to have less than 2% cancellations. Very hard. Like I post items specifically that result in less cancellations, and I'm close to that. But that's with like extensive research and like 2 years of figuring out what kind of items don't cause problems, right? Most people, especially if you're using like sniping strategies, you're going to have way more cancellations than most people because you are selling closer to the actual value of the item. So you're going to encounter more of the kind of more of the traffic that item actually gets, which is going to result in more kind of chaotic events that cause cancellations, right? So before I get too much more into talking about this subject, let's read the message that people got, okay? Hello, seller name. We monitor for sellers who select an incorrect cancellation reason. For orders that you have been unable to fulfill, you have selected buyer asked to cancel the order, or something was wrong with the buyer's shipping address. Because this activity unfairly manipulates our seller performance standards by avoiding defects, we've removed your top-rated seller status. If you are unable to fulfill an order, select the I'm out of stock option as the cancellation reason. Please make sure that your current and future cancel transactions follow these guidelines. If they don't, it could result in additional actions, including loss of buying and selling privileges on eBay. We'll invite you back to be a part of the top-rated seller program once you have met the requirements following these guidelines. Learn more about our selling practice policy. Link to selling practice policy. So this message was only received by people who were currently top-rated sellers, and they lost their top-rated seller status as they received this message. And that's because eBay got wise on them, and all of the people who lost this, most of them are drop shippers who have been canceling when they get an out of stock situation. And what they do is they see that the item's out of stock, and so then they send a script to the buyer that explains that they can't fulfill the sale, and as they send the script, then they also cancel the sale, okay? And I didn't get any kind of message like this. Keep in mind that could mean two things. It's possible that this kind of sweep that they're doing right now is only for top-rated sellers. So they don't care if you're not a top-rated seller at the moment and you're doing cancellations, right? Or it could be that because I do things a little bit differently, I didn't get noticed in this sweep. So I'm going to talk to you about some of my thoughts about this because, again, like this isn't the kind of thing I can just be like, hey, eBay, what's the best way to cancel an order when I'm out of stock? And I have to face the reality that more than 2% of my orders will be out of stock. So I do not have the option to sell on eBay and be completely honest about my cancellations because then I will lose my account. Can't talk to them like that, right? Whereas I am all about being honest and being as straight up as possible. This is the one thing that I have come to terms with, that because I'm a drop shipper and because I'm doing what I'm doing, I have to lie about it, basically, because eBay punishes you quite harshly. You can only have 2% or less of your transactions be canceled, which I think is kind of silly. And in my opinion, like, it should be up to the buyer, because the reality is that if an order is out of stock and you get back to the buyer within like 5 or 6 hours of them placing the order, or even within a day, usually they're pretty understanding. It's when you wait like a week or you wait a couple days and then you send them a message and you're like, oh, hey, by the way, you remember that thing you ordered like 5 days ago? I'm not going to send it to you, sorry. That's when people get frustrated. And I really wish that eBay would do more to kind of accommodate drop shippers, because honestly, I wish I could know more about eBay's numbers, and I have to remember that I'm a bulk drop shipper, so it's different than an optimizing drop shipper, because eBay earned like $40,000 for me last year. Optimization accounts don't pay eBay anywhere near as much because they only pay the 10% fees. You don't normally have to worry about insertion fees, whereas bulk accounts pay eBay a lot of money. So eBay's earning more money from my work than I am, definitely. So I wish eBay would kind of be like, hey, I understand this is what you're doing. You're producing sales, and really what we care about is you giving the buyer a positive experience. And if something goes wrong, that you accommodate the buyer. Really, that's what it should boil down to. It should be about the buyer's experience. And eBay has the policy where you can have 2% or less cancellations in the name of the buyer experience, but it kind of screws over sellers a little bit when you're drop shippers. But again, eBay wasn't made for drop shippers. Drop shippers use it. So on the other hand, I understand them not throwing a bone out to drop shippers when drop shippers kind of may bring more business, but a lot of drop shippers bring a lot of problems. Like, just from what I know about humanity, okay, there's an amount of people successfully drop shipping, right? There is a much, much, much bigger amount of people who get into it and then just screw up and never continue drop shipping, right? And I'm sure that amount of people probably causes damage to the customer experience on eBay. So I can understand eBay's kind of reluctance, you know what I mean? But they don't outright disallow drop shipping. You know, they call it product sourcing. And whenever I talk to eBay service reps, I tell them exactly what I'm doing. I'm always honest about that. The only thing I'm not honest about is when I cancel orders. So now let me talk to you a little bit more about the process that I have to cancel orders, okay? Most people have some long script and it's paragraphs, guys. Like, I hate this, that most dropshipping businesses, they've got a template of situation responses, right? And they're all like this freaking long. And it's like, hello, customer. It is with great shame that I have to say that I'm going to be unable to send you this because our manufacturer damaged the product and bullshit. And then the bullshit just got too out of hand. And now there's so much more bullshit in this paragraph that I'm just going to confuse you, and more bullshit and some words and some more apologies and some more bullshit and some more, and then bye. And it's just like, you have to understand the way people work. You want as few words as possible. The more words you have, the more chances that you're going to piss the buyer off. It only takes one misunderstood word to completely flip the buyer's experience. That's why I really, really encourage you, if you are using a template that has lots of different sentences in it, look at that template and figure out, is this sentence absolutely necessary? Because I can assure you that about 70% of the words in your template are not necessary and could contribute to more problems. And so, for example, in this particular situation, typically what people will do is they will send a script, so they copy a message, and the message says something like, hey, we're unable to fulfill the sale. Our order, the item is on back order, and I've had to cancel you. I'll offer you X% off, whatever. And then they go ahead and cancel the transaction. The thing is here, okay, and this is my thoughts. Keep in mind, this isn't fact. I don't know this for sure, but think about this. eBay has access to everything, all the messages, anything. And if you've talked to eBay's customer service team, then you know this, because whenever you'll tell them about an issue, and then they can literally read you what messages you sent. They see all of that. It all comes up, right? So we have to figure out, how is eBay seeing these flags? What automated system do they have that indicates to them that this selling account is lying about their cancellations? And so there's two things that I can think of when it comes to this subject. One is you look at, did the buyer send a message? Okay? Because how is it possible that the buyer requested a cancellation when the eBay rep can easily see, and so can their database easily see this, that the buyer has never sent a message to the seller regarding the transaction? How is it possible that the buyer requests to cancel the transaction? Well, obviously, they could have emailed you outside of eBay. They could have left a note in the sales record, but those are atypical situations. Most buyers will just message you. So I think that is one potential flag where eBay can see, okay, this person has claimed 20 of these orders were canceled because the buyer requested, but the buyer didn't send a message for a single one of these orders. That could be a potential flag. And then also, there's the phrasing that you use in the message. When you cancel a message saying that you have to cancel it or buyer requested, the best way to do it is to get a message from the buyer saying to cancel the order. You don't have to tell them why there's an issue. All you have to say is that there's an issue, right? And this is getting into the second thing, is the phrasing of your message. A lot of people will blatantly say, hey there, I'm sorry to say that we are out of stock of this item and have to cancel the order. Okay? You are admitting that you're out of stock in that message. It's possible that eBay has access to all of your messages. And so you have to understand that it's not like they're paying somebody to go through things. There's some kind of system that they have in place that flags stuff, and then eBay reps review the flags and figure out whether they're legit or not. Okay? So what we need to figure out as dropshippers is, one, how can we reduce our cancellations so that we can actually be honest? And I think in my situation, I was looking at the numbers earlier, and I think I may actually be able to be honest now, or at least most of the time. But I'll get into more about how I, in particular, handle cancellations. But for now, let's keep talking about this. So we need to figure out how we can reduce cancellations in general so it's not a problem in the first place. But also, look at your template that you're using. Because if you're using a long paragraph that says like, hey, we're out of stock, yada, yada, you are admitting that you're out of stock. I don't like it when people lie about it, like blatantly lie, and they're like, oh, hey, I shipped this out, but, you know, something got damaged with the order, the warehouse screwed something up. And look, this is what I say. I just don't provide the information. I message the person, and I'm like, hey there, I have made a mistake with this listing. I am unable to provide a guaranteed delivery date. At any point before I upload a tracking number, you may request that I issue you a full refund. I'm doing everything that I can to get this item shipped to you as soon as possible. Okay? Because when you say that, you are not admitting that you're out of stock. You're saying that there was a problem, but you're not telling them what that problem is. So obviously they could message you and ask more, but at this point they understand, okay, my order is not being sent out immediately. And if I want to, I can get a full refund right now. So most of the time they're just going to ask for that full refund, right? Make sure that you use as few words as possible. Like I said, I think that that is absolutely critical, because you're also going to the more words you use, the more likely you are to incriminate yourself. And so now, just to illustrate how often I use this, I actually don't use scripts in my eBay account, even with the bulk dropshipping. And the reason for that is that I find that as long as you focus on using as few words as possible and using the words that you have to use, making sure every sentence has a specific purpose, it usually takes roughly the same amount of time to type up your response as it does to go and copy it and paste it. That's how quick it should be, right? So imagine that we got an out of response situation. This is what I would do. Hey there. Unfortunately, I have made a mistake with this listing. I am unable to provide an expected delivery date. I take full responsibility for this mistake and apologize for wasting your time. At any point before I upload a tracking number, you may message me requesting cancellation, and I will issue a full refund. So obviously, okay, it's not as fast as copying and pasting it, and I could just copy and paste this message, but I've done this so many times that usually I just paste something like this, and then you go best, and then my name, okay? Or the account that shows up. So let's look at this here. We have the greeting, which is like hello. This is debatable. I don't think it's really that important, but I always say hello. And then here we have explaining the situation. Unfortunately, I've made a mistake with this listing. I'm unable to provide an expected delivery date. Okay? That means I'm telling the buyer, hey, I made a mistake. This item is not going to arrive on time. That's what these two sentences communicate. I made this mistake. Item's not going to arrive on time. I take full responsibility for this mistake and apologize for wasting your time. This is important because you want to take the blame off of the buyer's shoulders. Most negative experience with buyers come from when they think that you're trying to screw them over. The second they see that you're going to work with them and that you're going to respond and you're going to get them their money back, you're going to get a much more positive experience with the buyer. Most of the time, you want to make sure that the buyer doesn't feel like you're blaming them. So that's why I use this sentence. I take full responsibility for this mistake and apologize for wasting your time. Pretty much every time something goes wrong, even if it's the buyer's fault. Just because it makes things easier, I find that I get better results that way, and it makes it clear that the buyer didn't screw up. I screwed up. I am taking responsibility, okay? At least in words, when really I'm claiming that the buyer requested and yada, 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 right? And then here we go, okay, what's the next step? So at any point before I upload a tracking number, you may message requesting cancellation, and I'll issue a full refund. So that means that it's showing I do have intent of shipping the item out, but I'm just not sure when I'm going to be able to do that. And as far as eBay is concerned, you have 30 days to deliver the item, okay? If you can't do it in 30 days, then it's against their kind of policy, right? If you look at their sourcing guidelines for drop shipping, so go to eBay, is drop shipping allowed? And then we need to find their, about product sourcing, okay? So this is the eBay page, so you know this is legit. Product sourcing, sometimes called drop shipping, is one way to sell items on eBay. Boom! One way to sell items. It's allowed. There you go. Selling using a product sourcing service is allowed on eBay as long as the seller can guarantee that the item will be delivered to the buyer within 30 days of the end of the listing. So because I can't guarantee that, then technically we're, getting into gray area there. But I'm not blatantly admitting that I'm out of stock, and I'm also not using the word stock or out of stock or unable to fulfill. I have a feeling that eBay can scan your messages. Well, I know eBay can scan your messages, and there are certain keywords that can flag the messages, which will then get reviewed by a customer service rep or something, right? So that's another reason that I try and use as few words as possible, because if you use less words, then you reduce the chance that that's going to happen in the first place, okay? But this is all hypothetical. It's also possible that eBay just looks at your transaction defect rate, and if you're a big seller and you have a 0% defect rate, that doesn't make sense. You've got to be lying about something if you have 1,000 transactions a month and not a single one of them is a defect, right? So I think that it's important to acknowledge and do the cancellations properly some of the time so that it does look like that you are honest sometimes at least, and you're not just lying about everything, because then that reduces the chance that you're going to get flagged because you have an abnormally perfect score, which is impossible. There's no way to sell thousands of items on eBay and never have a single problem. You can do it in ways that the buyer always gets their money back and everything, right? So that's fine. But so here's just my thoughts on this issue. So we've covered the main things that you want to be careful with your scripts, because more words, again, this is something I really encourage people, use less words. It's not just going to help in this situation, it's also going to help with the buyer. You know how many buyers get these long freaking paragraphs explaining stuff, and the buyer may believe you, but you know what they're going to think? They're going to think it's fishy. The second you say anything about being unable to fulfill, or that the product was damaged when there was no shipment notification or no tracking number uploaded, they're gonna be like, this seems a little bit fishy. And maybe they never look into it more than that. But you want to use as few words as possible. So also, what I encourage people to do, especially as drop shippers, because I don't feel good about the fact that I lie about this. So I actually try to do that only when I absolutely have to. Most of the time, I'll either send the wrong item or I will message the buyer saying that I made a mistake in the listing and the item is actually for this item. So I'll be like, hey, the photo was wrong. I'm really sorry about this. Instead of the white one, the one I have is black. Because that's more understandable. Because you're like, hey, I made this mistake. human error, whatever. And it's true that I did make that mistake. Obviously, I'm not sharing all of the information and explaining that all of the listings were made with software and automatic, and I don't even know that I was selling it until you messaged me about it. But, you know, less is more, right? So what I encourage you to do is to have a couple different ways that you handle out-of-stock situations. And don't always do the same thing. You kind of want to spread your liability, right? So sometimes cancel because you're actually out of stock. And that's okay. Once you're an established seller, that's okay. You can do that. Like, if we do the math right here, like, this is a flag. I think that this is a flag now. Because I've had 561 transactions, and not a single one of them was canceled to out of stock. That seems like an issue, right? We have to make sure that this number stays below 5% or 2%. So when you're starting, that can be really hard, because say that you just start drop shipping, you screw up. You've had 4 sales and one of them's out of stock. That means 80 or 20% is your transaction defect rate is 20%. Okay. When you're beginning, never cancel because of out of stock. Always do something else. Send the wrong item. Send nothing. Anything is better than actually doing the cancel because you're out of stock. Even if you send nothing, you're going to get a bad review from that, which is going to affect your feedback most likely, right? But what's going to happen is enough time's going to pass, the buyer's going to open an item not received case, you're going to close the case with a refund, and your account is going to be completely unaffected by that, aside from the negative feedback that the buyer may or may not give you. eBay is... That's why I'm saying that they should really kind of change how they do transaction defects, because while it's great to think that everyone's going to be honest, you have to look at what incentivizes sellers. And especially as drop shippers, you are more incentivized to lie about your defect rate, because lying has very little consequence. Like, you may get a message from eBay and then have to be like, okay, now I can't use that cancellation. But then what do? Well, you either send nothing or you send the wrong item, because eBay doesn't care if you send the wrong item as long as you honor a refund, and eBay doesn't care if you do nothing as long as you honor a refund. If you close cases with refunds, they don't count against you. So because of that, it doesn't make sense to me that they punish cancellations so harshly. eBay should have the transaction defect rate be set up in a way where you can be honest about your defects, and it doesn't take away your ability to sell on eBay. Because the reality is, as a drop shipper, you can't be completely honest about your defect rate until you've really got a system down, which is going to take a long time, right? And it really, like, it's legitimately, there's relatively little that can go wrong from sending the buyer nothing. And that's sad. Like, that's just genuinely sad that eBay has this set up in a way that they will punish you for being honest and saying that you don't have the item, but they will not punish you for just ignoring the situation and doing nothing until the customer resolves the situation by claiming that the item hasn't been received yet, and then you close the case by fully refunding the customer, right? Because in this scenario, you're getting to keep the customer's money until they get around to noticing that the item hasn't gotten sent and opening the item not received case. Like, that's not good. Like, and that's the main reason that I actually do the cancellations, is because I think about the customer's experience, and I don't want to hold on to the customer's money if I'm not going to be able to fulfill the sale, right? So the best way to get them their money back as soon as possible is to cancel it. But by doing that, you're putting yourself at risk with eBay. But if you do nothing, no risk, as long as you don't let that case escalate. And then also, if you send the complete wrong item, as long as you honor a return, no risk. It's silly. Like, it is really silly the way that works. And I understand eBay's thinking. Like, it definitely makes sense. Like, oh, we don't want our sellers to cancel transactions because that's going to frustrate our buyers. And it's like, yeah, that's true. But the reality is that it happens, you know? And you have to think about what you're incentivizing your sellers to do. But again, this boils down to the argument of eBay isn't made for dropshippers. eBay is made for traditional sellers. And as a traditional seller, it's actually quite easy to keep your transaction defect rate low, because typically you don't sell stuff that you don't have, right? Whereas old drop shippers, we sell stuff that we don't have from the very beginning. So it's not that simple. But Now that I've talked to you a bit about this, I just wanted to do a shout out for you guys who are currently going through this problem. Understand that I've had like 3 or 4 different people tell me that they had top rated seller accounts, and yesterday or the day before they got a message saying they're no longer a top rated seller because the eBay believes that they're abusing the transaction defect cancellation thing. Okay, so I'm not advising you whether you should cancel or not cancel. What I'm saying is that like it's complicated and there's morality involved here. And there's you got to think about your customer's experience. And for me, I really wish that eBay just changed their system. The only tweak they would need to make is that you have to cancel within 12 hours of the sale or 24 hours of the sale. And if you do that, then it doesn't count against you. But if you wait longer than that, then it does. Because if that was true, that would present the true best situation for the buyer. Because the reality is, most of the time, buyers are understanding if you communicate with them quickly. If you take too much time, they're going to get frustrated. They're going to be like, why didn't you tell me this a week ago? So I think that the best way for eBay to handle this would be to set up some kind of system where if you cancel for being out of stock soon after the sale, then you don't get punished. Or you get punished like much less. Like imagine that they had 2 metrics. And so there was transactions you canceled for being out of stock and transactions you canceled for being out of stock late, right? That metric, I would understand that it has to be less than 2%. Because if you wait a week to tell your buyer that they're not going to get the item and then you refund them, buyers will get frustrated by that. They legitimately will. It's not a matter of some will. Most buyers will get frustrated by that because you took so long to communicate. But if you tell them quickly, most buyers are understanding, right? So that's what I think eBay should do, not that it matters, is they should actually have 2 metrics because that would give the best buyer experience and it would enable sellers to be more honest. And if sellers can be more honest, buyers are going to get better experiences. But by punishing cancellations the way that they do, eBay guarantees that dropshippers have to lie. And that kind of screws things up, right? But again, eBay is not made for dropshippers. But from my point of view, I understand that dropshipping is confusing to a lot of places because like most people don't really know or aren't very aware of what dropshipping is. Dropshipping awareness is becoming more and more of a thing, right? But typically what happens is you have a product being sold, and if you're selling a product, then everybody who sees that thinks that you have the product on hand. They have no concept of the fact that dropshipping is a thing and that you're ordering it from somewhere else. So people come from this area of ignorance, and that leads to them thinking that you are stealing their products, that you do not have the right to have inventory of their product, and you are copying the product. You're making it yourself because they sell the product. They know you didn't buy it from them because they would know if you did, right? But you didn't because you don't actually own any of that, but they don't realize that yet. And there's a whole lot of misunderstandings about dropshippers that make people kind of have this distaste against dropshippers. But most of it comes from just a lack of information and ignorance, unfortunately. But really what I want to see is more platforms that realize the potential that dropshippers offer. I want platforms that encourage dropshippers and give them a platform to be honest and open. And I think eBay kind of does that because they actually let you dropship, whereas Amazon just, once you get caught, you have to remake your account, right? Whereas eBay allows you to dropship. It does not go directly against their terms of use, right? So anyway, I hope this video is useful. I just wanted to talk to you guys, let you guys know that you're not alone in this kind of issue, and say that there are other situations. It's possible that the other resolutions for this are going to increase your return rate, or they're going to increase increase the amount of negative feedback you get. These are all possibilities, but don't worry, you don't have to straight up cancel everything for being out of stock, because you will lose your ability to sell on eBay. That literally isn't an option. So don't get scared because there are other options than that. You don't have to do that. Because I know for a lot of us, like getting our transaction defect rate to be lower than 2%, if we're being honest about our cancellations, is almost impossible. Like it's fairly common for new dropshippers to have a cancellation rate of like 40%. 2%? 40%? Those numbers are very, very, very different. And I think for me, my cancellation rate is like 7% or 8%, something like that. I haven't looked at it too much recently, but yeah. All right, guys, best of luck and keep at it. All right, see you next time. Ciao.